Hello everyone, this is Alex, and today I'm going to show you how to take something like this into something like this. That's right, we are writing this music for a string orchestra. The string orchestra is, and I said this probably 1,000 times on this channel, the core of the orchestra. In most of the orchestral repertoire, the string orchestra is really at the center of the musical discourse. So really understanding this section and the different subsections is kind of the first thing you want to do when learning how to write for a grand orchestra. And sometimes a woodwind and a brass section are not even necessary for your music to be very expressive, very powerful. And I'll show you a few techniques here from the repertoire on how to take, in this case, a 4-part music and to make it really sound epic and powerful within only the string orchestra. So let's start, shall we? So what you see here is the 4-part music. It's close to a 4-part chorale, but I would say maybe closer to modal counterpoint. Anyhow, we have these 4 lines and we're wondering how are we gonna apply them to the strings. So let's start with the melody, the upper line. Let's assign our first violins to this melody. We then have our alto voice, which can be applied to the second violin. Just make sure in that case that the lowest note, and in this case is the B flat right at the beginning, is playable on the string instrument. If it's below G, it's probably a line that will belong to the violas. Now this third line can be applied to the violas. It could have even been played by the violins, since we don't have notes lower than the G. And finally, we'll give the lowest line to the cellos and the double basses. When you usually have 4 parts like this, it's kind of standard to have both the cellos and the double basses play the lowest line together. But we'll see in a short moment how can we expand this a little bit more. And sometimes having them an octave apart like so. But be careful if you do this, it's because you want a lot of support for your strings. You want a lot of power. If you want something light, then you might consider having this whole section done only by the cellos and no double basses. But in this case, we want something huge, so we're going to leave these octaves in the lower register. Now, the other question about expanding this is whether or not we're going to add a higher octave on the melody. This is usually done by just adding some divisi in your first violins. So half of the section will play the lower octave and the other half will play the higher octave. So you see the IF on the 3rd bar on the G minor 7 chord. It's quite high for the instrument and it's very difficult to stay in pitch, but since there's the lowest F that supports it, then this will simply add a lot of light and power to the melody. Now the other question you might want to ask yourself when doing this kind of exercise is there something missing in between the notes? We can see quite a big gap on the first bar between the violas and the cellos. We could have space here for something else. I do see the same gap in the second bar between the violin 2 and the violas, but we can say that the 6 is not so bad here. So on the first and second bar, you see that I added an octave down the first violin's line. So this is really if you really want to emphasize the melodic line. If, for instance, you have a producer or you have a conductor who really likes this melody and wants it to stand out, well, this is the way to do it. And you see that adding this fills the gap in the first bars that we mentioned earlier. Now, of course, it's something you will have to do through the whole section. And now this is where we might utilize some more divisi action. We don't have to have our first violin divided into 3 because dividing a section makes it more and more weaker the more you do it. So since we have our cellos and double basses supporting each other, I would divide the cellos and have them play the lower part of the melodic line. Now, since this 4-part music has been carefully composed by myself, you can see that all this added line does not interfere with any other of these 4 lines, and again fills the gaps that were there before. Now to finish this arrangement, we can address what's going on in the cellos and the double basses. Now some long notes like this is certainly powerful, but if you use too much of it, it might start to feel heavy at the long term. So let's make a lighter version first of the double basses. This would be my first choice for the double basses. You could have them do pizzicatos as well, but really this is supposed to be a little bit more dramatic, and playing with the bow is certainly a lot more expressive and powerful just because there's a sustain to the sound. So finally, what about the cello? Do we leave it like this? I think we can make it better. So something that is typical in the lowest part of the string are to have the chords arpeggiated by the cellos. And now this is going to sound a lot more string friendly. I think this kind of arpeggio give our progression we had in the bass line before, but it also let it breathe while presenting the other notes from the chord. And I do believe that now we have a great epic string orchestra arrangement. Let's listen to the full thing now. Like I said, the string orchestra can really be powerful by itself, but you have to dose off especially the lowest register. And make sure to balance the divises so that you don't have a part that is quite important suddenly being played by only half a section. Now again, a string orchestra by itself sounds amazing, but why don't we try and add in some more instruments? Let's try to make this for full orchestra in the next video.